The Sierra Nevada. Majestic. Absolutely. Forbidding? You bet. And during the peak of World War II, these mountains became a silent, snow-draped predator. More than a dozen U.S. military aircraft, many of them massive four-engine B-24 Liberator bombers, flew into their granite embrace on what were supposed to be routine training missions, and simply never flew out. They vanished, often without a single distress call. Left behind, a chilling silence that would baffle investigators for decades to come. Picture it. The year is 1943. The world is caught in the firestorm of global war. Young men, some barely out of their teens, are being rushed through flight training. Their destination? The deadly skies over Europe and the Pacific. Their ride, the B-24 Liberator, a true titan of the air, a symbol of America's industrial power. But even before they could face the enemy, many of these crews met an equally tough adversary right here on home soil. The Sierra Nevada mountain range, that breathtaking spine of rock and ice stretching across California, became an unintended graveyard. And these weren't just isolated incidents. A disturbing pattern of disappearances started to emerge, each one making the mystery even deeper. What really happened to these state-of-the-art bombers and their crews? How could enormous aircraft just be swallowed by the wilderness, leaving little to no trace for years, sometimes for generations? We're going to explore the chilling stories of these lost flights, the desperate searches, the eerie discoveries, and the questions that, even today, seem to echo through those unforgiving canyons. So, to really get why these disappearances were so baffling, we need to understand the volatile mix of elements at play. World War II was a pressure cooker, forging heroes and demanding unbelievable sacrifice. The need for trained bomber crews was endless. The consolidated B-24 Liberator? It was a workhorse of allied air power. With its distinctive twin tails and that long, slender Davis wing, it was built for long distances and heavy bomb loads. Over 18,000 rolled off the assembly lines, making it the most produced American combat aircraft of the war. But it wasn't an easy plane to fly. It was known for being heavy on the controls, needing real physical strength and constant attention from its pilots, especially if they were flying slow or, heaven forbid, lost an engine. For young crews still getting the hang of its quirks, just flying the Liberator was a challenge. And where did they train? Often, right over the formidable Sierra Nevada. This wasn't by chance. The rugged peaks, deep valleys, and wild, unpredictable weather were meant to mimic some of the tough conditions they might face overseas. Airfields like Minter Field, Lemoore, and Hammerfield in California's Central Valley sat right at the foot of this granite wall. From there, training flights would take crews up and over the mountains for navigation drills, bombing practice, and getting used to high altitudes. But the Sierras aren't just pretty postcards. They're a place of extreme weather. The Sierra wave, a powerful atmospheric phenomenon, can create invisible vortexes of air strong enough to rip a plane apart or slam it into a mountainside. Sudden, vicious snowstorms can swallow peaks in minutes, dropping visibility to zero and coating wings with dangerous ice. And then there are the downdrafts, like unseen waterfalls of air, that could snatch a heavy bomber right out of the sky and dash it against the unyielding rock. Navigation back in the 1940s? It was a world away from today's GPS. Pilots relied on dead reckoning, pilotage, navigating by the stars, and pretty basic radio beacons. In the vast, often cloud-covered wilderness of the Sierra Nevada, landmarks could be confusing or just plain invisible. Radio signals? They could get twisted and distorted by the mountains. One tiny miscalculation, a moment of being lost in a complete whiteout, could send a plane miles off course, deep into uncharted and inescapable territory. These were the ingredients for disaster. Powerful aircraft, crews still learning the ropes in a treacherous, often misunderstood environment. The list of B-24s lost in the Sierra Nevada is a grim one. Each entry is a stark reminder of the dangers these crews faced. While getting exact numbers is tough, because of wartime record keeping and the sheer number of training operations, several key incidents really stand out. Their stories have been pieced together from official reports, later discoveries, and the lasting memories of those who searched. One of the earliest, and a really clear example, is the case of B-24E Liberator, serial number 427095. On December 5, 1942, this bomber, with a crew of 6, took off from Hammerfield near Fresno. Their mission was a standard navigation training flight. They were expected back that evening. They never made it. The last anyone heard was a routine radio call. Then just silence. Searches kicked off immediately, but the sheer size of the Sierra Nevada, plus winter conditions, made it an almost impossible task. Planes crisscrossed the suspected flight path, but the dense forests and snow-covered peaks offered no clues. Weeks turned into months. With no sign of the bomber or its crew, they were eventually declared missing, presumed lost. The mountains had claimed another victim, leaving behind only questions and the quiet sorrow of families. Another chilling disappearance involved a B-24D Liberator. In the late afternoon of December 2, 1943, this bomber, carrying a crew of 6, departed from Fresno. Its mission? A high-altitude flight over the Sierras, then out over the Pacific and back. The weather, clear at first, started to turn nasty as a powerful winter storm rolled in. The aircraft was last plotted over the rugged terrain near what's now Kings Canyon National Park. Then, like so many others, it just vanished from radar screens and radio waves. Huge searches were organized. For 16 days, planes scoured the snow-blanketed peaks, fighting dangerous winds and terrible visibility. But the bomber had been swallowed whole. No wreckage, no signals, nothing. The crew, like the plane itself, was simply gone, absorbed by the unforgiving wilderness. The official report could only conclude aircraft missing on a navigational training flight, cause unknown. This was a common, frustrating refrain for so many of these incidents. The lack of immediate evidence, the impossibility of searching every remote canyon and peak, meant the truth stayed buried, often for decades, under layers of snow and silence. And these aren't isolated stories. Other B-24s, and plenty of other types of military aircraft, met similar fates in the Sierra Nevada during the war years. Each disappearance followed a disturbingly similar script: a routine flight, a loss of contact, and then an agonizing, often fruitless search. The military, under the immense pressure of war, could only spare so many resources for so long. Eventually, the active searches would be called off, and the files marked unresolved. The Sierra Nevada was quickly earning a grim reputation as an aircraft trap, a place where machines and men ventured sometimes never to return, their stories becoming whispers then legends among local communities and the wider world of aviation. For the families of the lost airmen, the silence that descended after these disappearances was a special kind of torment. Without wreckage, without any confirmation of what happened to their loved ones, closure was out of reach. They lived in a painful limbo, caught somewhere between hope and despair. Letters went unanswered. Official inquiries offered little new information, and the war machine, understandably focused on the battles overseas, moved on. The crews became names on casualty lists, their stories fading from public memory, but never from the hearts of those they left behind. As the war ended and the years ticked by, the lost B-24s of the Sierra Nevada slipped further into memory, becoming part of the region's folklore. Tales started to circulate among mountaineers, loggers, and locals. Whispers of ghost planes, of strange sounds in remote canyons, of the mountains jealously guarding their secrets. The sheer scale of the wilderness made any kind of systematic, long-term searching nearly impossible. Snowpacks in the high country can stick around for years, entombing wreckage. Dense forests can quickly hide even large debris fields. The terrain itself, a chaotic mess of granite cliffs, deep gorges and scree slopes, is a daunting barrier to anyone trying to explore it. For the military, these cold cases remained open but inactive. The technology of the time had been stretched to its limits during the initial searches. Without new leads, there wasn't much more they could do. The focus shifted to recovering from the war, and then, pretty quickly, to the new realities of the Cold War. The lost bombers of the Sierra became a kind of footnote in the grand story of World War II, a poignant reminder of the other casualties, those lost not in direct combat, but in the dangerous business of preparing for it. This period of silence, though, wasn't the end. It was more like an intermission. The mountains are patient, but they don't keep their secrets forever. The forces of nature, shifting glaciers, erosion, the slow turn of the seasons, would eventually start to offer up clues, often in the most unexpected ways. This would reignite the mysteries, and for some, offer a path towards answers they'd waited so long for. The legend of these vanished aircraft lingered, a haunting presence in the High Sierra, just waiting for the day their stories would once again see the light. As silence finally began to break, not with official statements, but through chance encounters, people venturing deep into the Sierra's remote corners. Hikers, climbers, sometimes even park rangers, would stumble upon stark, metallic reminders of those wartime tragedies. One of the most famous and heartbreaking discoveries is that of the B-24 Liberator that crashed on Mendel Glacier in Kings Canyon National Park. This aircraft, 412-9117, with its crew of 6, vanished on a training flight from Bakersfield on November 18, 1942. Initial searches? Nothing. For nearly 5 years, their fate was a complete unknown. Then, in August 1947, a group of university students climbing Mount Mendel spotted wreckage glinting high on the glacier. Investigations later identified the aircraft, and tragically, the remains of its crew encased in the ice. The glacier, in its slow, relentless crawl, was starting to give up its secrets. Over the decades, as Mendel Glacier has receded due to climate change, more of the aircraft and personal items of the crew have periodically emerged, offering a chilling, tangible link to that terrible day. Some crew members were recovered and identified fairly soon after the first discovery, but parts of the wreckage and, heartbreakingly, human remains continued to surface from the ice as recently as the 21st century. Each new find triggers a fresh wave of questions and remembrance. The B-24D that disappeared back on December 2, 1943, also eventually gave up its secrets, but not for 16 long years. In 1959, a geologist named William Brewer was doing fieldwork in an incredibly remote and rugged part of Kings Canyon National Park, near Hester Lake, when he came across scattered aircraft debris. Further investigation confirmed it. This was the missing Liberator. The wreckage was strewn across a desolate, high-altitude basin, a clear sign of a violent impact. The remains of the crew were later recovered and laid to rest. The discovery site, far from any logical flight path and at an altitude that spoke volumes about the terrifying power of Sierra weather, provided grim answers. But it also raised new questions about the aircraft's final, desperate moments. Were they lost? Battling an impossible storm? Were they trying to climb above the peaks when disaster struck? These discoveries, while bringing some measure of closure, often just highlighted how impossible survival would have been in such crashes, and the truly formidable nature of the terrain that had hidden them for so long. The term swamp ghost of the Sierra Nevada, while not referring to one specific plane like its Pacific namesake, started to evoke the collective mystery of these lost B-24s. Phantoms of the high country, their stories emerging piece by piece, decade by decade. Finding the wreckage didn't always mean finding all the answers. Sometimes, the twisted metal and scattered remnants only deepened the sense of tragedy and the baffling circumstances that led these powerful war machines to their doom in such a desolate, beautiful, yet utterly unforgiving landscape. Each discovery served as a fresh reminder of the many other aircraft still out there, their locations unknown, their stories perhaps locked away forever within the stone and ice of the High Sierra. So, why? Why did so many B-24s meet their end in the Sierra Nevada? Why were these incidents so baffling, often leaving investigators scratching their heads? The explanations aren't simple. They're a complex mix of environmental fury, the limits of technology at the time, and the intense pressures of a world at war. The Sierra Nevada itself is a major player in these tragedies. Its topography is an aviator's nightmare, especially when the weather turns sour. Jagged peaks shoot up over 14,000 feet, often hidden in cloud. Deep, narrow canyons can become inescapable traps, offering no room for a large, multi-engine bomber to maneuver. Downdrafts, especially on the leeward side of the range, can be sudden and incredibly powerful, stronger than a plane's ability to climb. These mountain waves and the turbulence they create weren't fully understood by meteorologists or pilots in the 1940s, making them an invisible and often deadly threat. Icing conditions could build up fast, adding tons of weight to an aircraft in minutes, messing with lift, and potentially leading to stalls or a complete loss of control. And then there were the sudden, violent snowstorms or whiteouts that could drop visibility to just a few feet, transforming familiar terrain into a disorienting and lethal maze. Navigational tech back then, while getting better, was still pretty basic by today's standards. Pilots relied heavily on visual flight rules, meaning they had to see where they were going, and dead reckoning, which is calculating your position based on your course, speed, and time. If you're in a featureless cloud bank or a raging snowstorm over mountains, those visual references disappear, and dead reckoning can lead to big errors. Radio navigation aids, like low-frequency range stations, were few and far between, and their signals could be unreliable or even misleading in mountainous areas because of interference and reflection. A crew just slightly off course, thinking they were in a safe corridor, could easily fly straight into a mountain hidden by weather. Mechanical failure is always a possibility, but it's often harder to confirm without a detailed look at the wreckage, which, as we've seen, was frequently impossible for decades. The B-24 Liberator, for all its strengths, had its weak spots. Engine fires weren't unheard of, and losing power from one or more engines over high terrain, that would be catastrophic. Pilot inexperience, or maybe more accurately, inexperience with these specific, extreme conditions, undoubtedly played a part. These were often young crews, sometimes with limited flight hours, suddenly in command of complex, heavy bombers. While they were trained, nothing could fully prepare them for the unique ferocity and treachery of Sierra Nevada weather systems when encountered at their absolute worst. Wartime training schedules were crunched, pushing men and machines to their limits. The urgent need to produce combat-ready crews meant that risks were just part of the training process itself. The baffling nature of these disappearances came from all these factors combined. Planes would take off in what seemed like manageable conditions, only to be overwhelmed by localized, rapidly developing weather. Without modern flight data recorders or emergency locator transmitters, if a plane went down in a remote area, especially during winter, it could be completely buried by snow within hours, making visual searches from the air almost useless. The vastness and ruggedness of the terrain meant that even if searchers were looking in the right general area, spotting wreckage amidst the jumble of rocks, trees, and snowfields was like finding a needle in a continent-sized haystack. So, the official investigations often ended inconclusively, citing unknown factors or adverse weather, basically acknowledging the overwhelming power of an environment that simply outmatched the technology and, at times, the skill of those who dared to fly through it. Beyond all the twisted metal and the baffling circumstances, the real heart of the Sierra Nevada B-24 mysteries lies in the human stories, the lives of the young airmen who took off on those fateful training flights. They were sons, brothers, husbands, and friends. They came from every corner of America, brought together by a common purpose, but tragically cut down before they could even reach the front lines. Most were in their early 20s, their futures full of promise, now forever frozen in time, high in those silent, snowy peaks. Think about the crew of that Mendel Glacier B-24, Second Lieutenant William Gamber, the pilot, Flight Officer John Mortensen, the co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Wallace F. Denuzzo, the navigator, Second Lieutenant Ernest G. Munn, the bombardier, Staff Sergeant Robert P. Vile, the engineer, and Staff Sergeant Harry L. Kearn, the radio operator. Their names, once just entries on a missing aircraft report, have, through the glacier's slow, steady revelations, become tangible links to the past. Finding personal items, a ring, a wallet, photographs, alongside their remains brought a poignant, heartbreaking intimacy to a tragedy that had, for decades, been a somewhat abstract historical event for many. For their families, these discoveries, however grim, offered a kind of closure, a final resting place identified, a story finally reaching its sorrowful end. The search and recovery efforts, both right after the disappearances and decades later, were often incredibly dangerous for the searchers themselves. Military personnel, park rangers, and civilian volunteers faced the exact same treacherous terrain and unpredictable weather that had claimed the aircraft. The dedication it took to locate and then try to recover remains from high-altitude crash sites, often in glacier-carved landscapes, speaks volumes about the commitment to honoring the fallen. The legacy of these lost crews is now being kept alive through the work of historians, aviation archaeologists, and organizations dedicated to finding and documenting military crash sites. Websites and forums allow researchers and family members to connect, sharing information and piecing together these fragmented stories. Memorials have been put up, both near some of the accessible crash sites and in hometowns across the country, making sure that the sacrifice of these airmen, who died while training to defend their nation, is not forgotten. These stories are a powerful reminder of the hidden war fought on the home front, the relentless training, the constant danger, and the toll it took far from any designated combat zone. The B-24s and their crews who vanished into the Sierra Nevada are more than just unsolved mysteries. They're a vital part of our history, representing the courage, the youth, and the profound losses of that generation. Uncovering their stories, understanding the challenges they faced, and remembering their sacrifice is a way of making sure that these echoes in the wilderness continue to be heard. The Sierra Nevada still holds so many secrets. If you find these historical mysteries as gripping as we do, why not subscribe for more deep dives into the unexplained and the unforgettable? And let us know in the comments below, are there other wartime enigmas or baffling disappearances you'd like us to investigate in future episodes? Your suggestions really help shape our journey into the unknown. When you look back at the saga of the vanished B-24 liberators in the Sierra Nevada, it's a chilling chronicle, isn't it? A story of ambition, the untamed power of nature, and mystery that just endures. These weren't just isolated accidents. They formed a pattern of loss that really highlighted the brutal, learning curve of wartime aviation and the unforgiving nature of one of America's most majestic, yet perilous, mountain ranges. Even when wreckage was found, often decades later, the discoveries frequently raised as many questions as they answered, leaving the core of the enigma. What exactly happened in those final, fatal moments? shrouded in speculation. What truly happened in the cockpits of those doomed bombers as they battled terrifying weather, disorientation, or maybe mechanical failure? We can piece together theories from the wreckage, from historical records, from our understanding of the brutal Sierra environment. But the full truth often lies silent with the crews themselves. They remain a testament to the fine line between technological mastery and the overwhelming forces of the natural world. A line that was crossed too many times in the urgent, pressure cooker environment of World War II training. The B-24 mysteries of the Sierra Nevada are more than just tales of lost aircraft. They're a poignant reminder of the human cost of conflict, a cost that extended even to training grounds far from any enemy fire. They speak of courage in the face of known and unknown dangers, of young lives cut short far too soon, and of our relentless human desire to find answers, to bring closure, and to remember. The granite peaks and silent glaciers continue to stand guard over these wartime secrets. Their stories a haunting, indelible part of the American landscape and its complex, often tragic, history. That baffling silence from those lost flights, it continues to echo, a solemn tribute to the men who flew into the mystery and never returned. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the Sierra Nevada's wartime secrets. If you found this investigation informative and thought-provoking, please give this video a like. It genuinely helps our channel reach others who share a passion for history and mystery. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next exploration into the unexplained. If you'd like to support our research and help us create more content like this, you can find links in the description below. Until next time, keep questioning.